Guide, and over these last weeks, we've been exploring that question, what do you fear? My hope is that you've taken some time to acknowledge some of your fears throughout this series. By examining how Mary and Joseph and Herod and others faced their own challenges and uncertainties, perhaps we've begun to view our personal fears from maybe a different perspective and seen different ways in which to address that. Their stories have offered us valuable insights and teachings, and reminding that confronting our own fears can often lead to a deeper understanding of ourselves. Many times when we find fears, we like to shove them away and say, I'll just deal with that later. And we never really get around to wrestling with that issue. But when we confront our fears and we begin to wrestle with what that fear is in a deep and meaningful way and really flesh that out, it can lead to transformative growth for us. Not just our own, but then that kind of spills out. And it spills out into the life of others, and then it can spill out into the life of our communities. So today, if you haven't guessed, is Epiphany Sunday, and that's that Sunday when we acknowledge the arrival of the Magi, often known as Three Kings or the Wise Men. And we often recognize during that time Jesus, the light of the world. For many of us, the Magi in the Christmas story often brings to mind those scenes from when our kids were in Christmas pageants, or the grandkids, or whatever kids you conjure up in your mind, dressed in costumes, and they're carrying gifts and reenacting that scene of the Magi's visit. And while those depictions are really familiar and they're endearing and they are fun, they really overlook the reality of the treacherous journey that the Magi undertook. The Magi's role in the story then sometimes gets reduced to this dramatic entrance and the big ta-da moment when they arrive and kneel before the newborn king, and then that's usually where that pageant ends. However, their pilgrimage was far more than just a simple little procession of three people. It was a journey that was marked by many, many challenges, uncertainty, perseverance, and it ultimately culminates in their worship of Jesus. But a whole lot happens on that journey and on that way. Much like the rest of the Christmas story, fear permeates the Magi's journey to worship Jesus. The Magi's road was long, it was uncertain. They traveled far from home into unknown lands, and unlike you and I, they didn't have a GPS or a road map to guide them. They were guided by the light of a star with a hope and a promise. And part of that hope is that they were really understanding that star and following that star in the direction that it was leading. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I use my GPS, even though I'm following it, I get led in a direction that I did not intend to go because I turned like 0.2 of a mile early. So there was a lot of hope that they would reach their destination. No doubt that journey led them into some strange places, unknown people, possible dangers. Yet every step that they took was a testament to faith, and a testament to faith-seeking truth. As the Magi followed the star, I'm sure that they had their doubts and their unanswered questions. Sometimes as we're following the call of God and following Jesus in our lives, I don't know about you, but I have sometimes a lot of questions. I wish that I had that direct, line that would just answer my questions the way I'd like to hear them answered. And certainly, as they're following the star, they know something's amiss. The star is strange to begin with. We, too, on our faith journey, sometimes have doubts. We have unanswered questions, moments where our beliefs are challenged, and we find ourselves with problems that don't always have immediate answers. And truthfully, sometimes we face problems and the answers don't always come. The Magi faced opposition from Herod, and like the Magi, at times, our own faith walk can mean facing resistance from those in authority or a community who might be threatened by us. Sometimes it's our family who feels threatened by who we are and what we choose to believe. Sometimes people feel threatened by the Herods of this world and the way that, Herod responded to the Magi's request to find Jesus was no little thing. Like the Magi, we too carry with us our own set of personal fears. Our faith journey often exposes our own insecurities, which can tempt us to turn back to old ways or settle for comfort rather than to continue forward. Sometimes it's simply just easier not to push against things, but just to remain comfortable. And I don't know about you, but the older I get, the more I have to struggle with that, because it's a whole lot easier just to be comfortable. After all, I'm old. It's a whole lot easier just to sit in the comfort and bask in the light of Jesus rather than be challenged by it. So there's always this uncertainty surrounding whether our journey is going to produce the answers we hope for, much like the Magi's journey. And it's true, changing circumstances often lead to fear. I'm not a fan of change. I know, I try to get people to change all the time, that's my job. But I'm not a big fan of things being changed up in my life just willy-nilly. And yet sometimes change leads us to places we never thought imaginable or we never dreamed of. Life's path can often shift unexpectedly through loss or changes in relationships, new challenges that's going to force us to adapt as we're still journeying and seeking the truth of Jesus Christ in our life, like the Magi who chose not to return by the same route. Sometimes our faith journeys to worship the King might require us to leave behind those familiar habits or beliefs and embrace the change of the unknown. Like the Magi, the pursuit of a deeper relationship with Jesus sometimes puts us in places or situations where we face these moral and ethical dilemmas, and we have to make really hard choices that might not be real popular. We have to weigh our values and our convictions against all these external pressures. Traveling through these uncertain times are going to call for us to be hopeful. Like the Magi, we're going to have hope and perseverance and faith that believes the journey itself is transformative, even when the destination isn't really clear. That title, "We Keep Walking," might remind us that the wise men kept walking despite the fears and challenges that they faced. The Magi followed that star to find Jesus, and so that star symbolizes, and their following and their walking symbolizes faith and perseverance and change through choosing God's plan over other ways. Matthew's gospel tells us after Jesus was born in Bethlehem, in the territory of Judea during the reign of King Herod, Magi came from the east to Jerusalem. Now, I don't know about you, but it's easy to kind of think of that journey as a hop, skip, and a jump over to the next community. It's believed that the Magi tracked that star nearly 800 miles from the east, and they were on foot. They were on foot. So imagine 800 miles of treacherous desert roads, harsh weather, and the constant risk of bandits and animals and anything else that might be on that journey. This was not a casual stroll or an adventurous road trip. This was a deliberate and costly pursuit, and it was a journey of faith. They weren't just random wanderers as we sometimes envision them. The Magi, they were men of considerable status and influence in their communities. Their journey had begun at the Parthian Empire, a formidable kingdom located just east of Jerusalem, some 800 miles. Unlike casual hikers, they held important positions within their realm, and they embarked on a quest with intention and purpose. Their presence and actions weren't only notable, but they carried political, spiritual, and symbolic weight as they sought this newborn king. To put it on a modern map, Parthia covered much of what we now know is Iraq and Iran, and it stretched south into the Arabian Peninsula. It was a powerful empire that rivaled Rome. In today's terms, the Magi are often called astrologers, and we refer to them in biblical times that way too, but they were different than the way we look at astrologers today. They didn't forecast your daily horoscope or post online about your finances, relationships, or what your career might look like in 2026. They were men of religious scholarship. And in biblical times, they were a part of that priestly political class of their society. They were advisors who played key role in the governance of their empire. Their origins can be traced clear back to the time of Daniel. So these Magi, hundreds of years later, they weren't just star chasers, they were truth seekers. They were wisdom givers. And moreover, they were king makers. They were the ones who anointed their kings in their empires. No wonder Herod is a little uneasy. Their presence then was this political, spiritual statement. And furthermore, when they traveled, they didn't just slip into town unnoticed. I mean, it's easy when you think about them traveling across the desert and we see those little postcards with 3 camels and 3 little kings to think that that's all there was. But it was far more than that. They traveled with escorts and servants and camels that carried valuables and food. If this occurred in the present day, it would look like a procession of some really big-time cars, like, your SUVs, a Mercedes-Benz, or whatever you can think of. There would be this big entourage of motorcycles and all the whoop-de-doo that goes along with that, arriving in your neighborhood. Now imagine that in Remington, Indiana. If you see a whole entourage of vehicles like that pulling into Remington, Indiana, what are y'all going to think? Something important's going on. So as this procession makes its way into town, people inevitably, those people that they did live in the desert, by the way, so they're going to gather in crowds like we would here. Our curiosity is going to be piqued, and we're going to have our phones ready. I mean, trust me, I live in Meadow North, and when the ambulance goes by, I see everybody walk out their door. Imagine what would happen if there was an entourage. Buzzing conversations are going to ripple through everyone. Who are these people, and what are they doing here? That arrival of such important and mysterious figures would create quite a whir of excitement and speculation, drawing everyone out to kind of see what's happening. I mean, we'd be getting out our phones and be posting on all the social media platforms, capturing every detail as we tried to unravel the purpose behind these visits. That's the kind of scene that kind of unfolds when the Magi arrive in Jerusalem and encounter King Herod. This is no, few little guys with a couple camels. And when they come, well, they come asking the absolute wrong question, because they ask a question that will shake the foundations of Jerusalem and Herod's golden throne. Where is the one who has been born the King of the Jews? You can just see Herod. What? What are you talking about? Because with that inquiry, Herod is filled with fear by the news that somebody's going to unseat him. He was a ruler who was grasping to keep his power, a man who ruled with an iron fist, and he had a jealous and a paranoid heart. So Herod represents that worst kind of power, one who responds not with humility, but with tyranny. The slaughter of the innocents parallels Pharaoh's infanticide in Exodus 1, showing how unchecked fear can lead to violence. Herod's actions were acts of sheer evil born out of his fear. So history remembers Herod as the violent, insecure tyrant that he was. This was the kind of ruler who's going to eliminate anyone that he expects to threaten his throne. And by the way, that included his own family. I mean, he killed his own sons. So when the Magi entered Jerusalem asking about a new king of the Jews, they unintentionally stir up this hornet's nest that alarms Herod, and rightly so. If these powerful men had come all the way from the east to worship a newborn king, then that king was a threat to Herod's power, and he would have none of that. And when he heard this, we're told that all of Jerusalem was disturbed. And why was all of Jerusalem disturbed? Because they knew exactly what Herod was capable of. And they knew when he felt threatened, the violence that he could instill. They'd seen his rage before. They knew that bloodshed was likely to come and innocent lives would get caught in the crossfire. No, they probably didn't know that he was going to order the death of every child under 2, but they knew that the consequences would be deleterious. So the Magi's journey was not this fearless journey. There was fear all around them, yet despite all of the fears the Magi faced, they walked on into the fear of the unknown under troubling orders to go and search carefully for this child and then report back to Herod. The question is never, does fear exist? The question is, what do we do with our fears? Do we freeze and do nothing? Do we flee from it and ignore it like, well, it's really not there? Do we just sit and tremble and wring our hands? Do we allow the fears of the Herods of this world to silence us so that we keep our mouth shut? Or do we move forward and just walk on because the temptation to give up is really strong in the face of violence and under the threat of that? So make no mistake, the Magi knew of danger, not just the dangerous trip that they would embark on, but they had an inkling of Herod's tyranny, that they dare to make that trip anyway. And then to defy Herod's orders to report back to him. Having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they went back to their own country by another route. They defied Herod's orders. The Magi know that their recognition of the infant Jesus as King of the Jews terrifies Herod. Yet they journey on to worship the king and seek truth. The Magi didn't allow Herod's fear to stop them, and they didn't let Herod's fear-driven demands keep them from honoring this newborn Christ or returning home for a different way. You know, they could have said, you know what, we'll just go let Herod know. I mean, it's no big deal. So they model for us what it looks like to be led by hope and move through fear without letting it paralyze you or stop you from your call. I like what Dr. Reverend Boyne Lee writes, who is the commentary that I've been looking at throughout this, and she says, their homage is not merely devotional, it's political. By kneeling before Jesus, they make a bold and embodied declaration that their loyalty lies not with the empire, but with the vulnerable child who reveals another way of power. The Magi remind us of a profound truth that God honors those who seek him. The journey might be long. It might be filled with uncertainty and obstacles, but when you pursue Jesus with all of your heart, when you keep walking forward, Jesus isn't ever going to leave you empty-handed. After encountering Christ, the Magi, yes, they go home by another way, but that phrase implies more than, just taking a different highway. They go home transformed and changed. They go home changed by what they experienced and what they saw in their heart and their souls. So yeah, they go home by another way and by another route because they're not the same as they were when they started. They were transformed by their journey with their worship of Jesus, light of the world. And that's the power of Epiphany. It's not just this moment of recognition, aha, as we sometimes get taught. Right? Sometimes we lead people to believe, well, it's an aha moment. Yes, it is an aha moment, but it's kind of more than that. It's the beginning of a new path. I don't know if you've ever had an aha moment, but usually those moments kind of change our mind. It's like, oh, I get something new and something different. And so my directions or my thoughts or my feelings or whatever have changed. The Magi become witnesses to God's new order, not by heritage or status, but through their bold seeking and by walking on. They do what Herod and his associates refused to do. They seek out Jesus, the newborn king. They kneel in humility and they listen all along the way to God's leading. Epiphanies aren't always warm and fuzzy as we've been taught, and they're not always personal. Sometimes they're disruptive and even dangerous. Sometimes they lead to confrontation with the powers that be, and sometimes they ask us to cross borders, and sometimes they send us home by another way. Always they ask something of us. Are we going to let fear determine our actions? Or will we move with and in the direction that God calls us to? The Magi's journey then becomes an invitation to us to put aside our fears and walk on through the journey, maybe long and maybe uncertain. I wonder, what is fear keeping you from today? Like the Magi, are you at the start of a journey that God is calling you to take? Are you, like Mary and Joseph, feeling that need to turn and run so that you can protect and trust God in uncertain times. You know, running doesn't always mean that we're fleeing a big bad monster. Sometimes running means we're making a choice to protect and care for. We can't always choose our circumstances, but we can always choose our response. The Magi chose to keep walking. Mary and Joseph chose to obey. Even in sorrow, the people in Bethlehem found God present in the midst of their pain. Our fears are real, and we can't deny that. But sometimes it's the fear of the unknown, the fear of loss, the fear of leaving the familiar behind. But as followers of Jesus, we are not called to be paralyzed by fear. We are called to keep walking step by step and trust that God is with us. The journey may not be easy, but the promises are sure. In the face of fear, then, let us travel together as we walk on into 2026. Let us walk with each other. If you look around, we're a small community, but we have a community of folks here. Let us walk together and hold each other up. Celebrate the joys and celebrate the sorrows. Let us defy injustice not with swords, but with solidarity. Let us kneel in awe, not before the powerful, but before Christ, whose birth marks the beginning of Christ's peace campaign. Let us believe with trembling hope that fear doesn't have the last word, and that fear is not going to stop us. And as this new year begins, let us proclaim that we will walk. We will make conscious decisions to follow God's light, even if the path seems uncertain, faint, or just like something we could never do. And this new year begins, let us proclaim that we're going to walk, seeking an encounter with Christ. And when that epiphany light shines upon us, that we will worship Christ, the newborn King, Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us. As we go to communion this morning, I want to remind you that all are invited to Christ's table. God is with you. Lift up your hearts. Let us give thanks to the Lord. It is a right and joyous thing to lift our hearts and hands to you, God of light and love, and thanksgiving for your gift of grace. Before we knew the unsearchable riches of your child Jesus, we walked in shadows and cloud. But now, as you reveal radiance to the world, we join the hymn sung in glory without end. Holy God, grace revealed. Heaven and earth are full of your glory. Blessed is the one who comes in your name. Hosanna in the highest. Blessed are you, Creator God, and blessed is your child Jesus. While wise ones brought him gold, incense, and myrrh, he grew to reveal to us countless treasures, radiant with life and grace, revealing the shining mystery which is you. Jesus broke bread and broke open your love for us. He blessed the cup and poured out mercy for the world. Christ was promised. Christ is born. Christ will dwell among us. Come, Spirit. Dwell among us, your sons and daughters. Bless this feast. Gather us here together to feast at this table. Use us to reveal your gifts of love and light for the world. God of the ages, shining among us, we are yours. Amen. It's the body of Christ.